Welcome to the Buck Stops here, the official podcast of NotInHallOfFame.com, and I'm your host, Kirk Buchner, aka The Buck, and we're going to go back to our series of those possibly overlooked for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, part 5 of an 8-part series. We're looking at the teams of the NFC West. Vinny Lospinuso, the man who knows Pro Football Hall of Fame stuff better than pretty much everyone combined. Maybe we should get him on that committee because he certainly seems to be more passionate than probably all the people who are on that combined. So let's get right to it. We're going to look at part 5, the NFC West. That's the Seattle Seahawks, Los Angeles Rams, San Francisco 49ers, and the Arizona Cardinals. Here it comes. Vinny, it's good to have you back. I understand I'm not talking to a teenager anymore, so I don't feel as creepy.
Yeah, I'm 20 now. I'm no longer a teenager. I never thought it was creepy in the first place, but for some people it is.
Well, you got to remember, I'm a mid-40s year old something, and I'm conversing with someone I met online, so I feel like I'm very to catch a predator at this point, so... despite the very harmless way we sort of discuss football over Twitter, it's just it's also middle-aged white male guilt that I suffer. But that's also that's a me problem, not a you problem.
You need to understand, young chap. I was gonna say my Herbert voice from Family Guy, but I just laughed in the middle of it.
I wasn't sure which one you were doing, but yes, Herbert. The things you can get away.
Hey there, Chris. Hey there, Chris.
The things you can get away with in animation that you could never do in a regular TV series. That is incredible. So we got we've got a loaded NFC West, and oh my God, and it's going to be like that way. I think as long as we're touching the NFC, it's the older conference. We've got 4 teams here. With varying degrees of success, but 3 of which have been around for a very, very long time. We've always done things alphabetically, and I guess we're starting with Arizona Cardinals, but if I know you, you're going to talk about someone who was not a Cardinal when he was in Arizona. I think you got a big one that you're going to start off with.
Yeah, before I even start with the most deserving Cardinal, I have a question for everyone listening. When were the Cardinals founded?
I got to think myself.
Do you know that answer?
I believe 1926.
Nope. 1898.
1898.
They've been around since 1898.
I was not aware of that. I thought for sure would have been like in the early 20s or even the late teens.
Nope, they've been around since 1898. Yeah, they're by far the oldest team in the NFL.
My God, then they should be playing in the oldest stadium or the worst stadium. So they should be moving to Buffalo. Sorry, any chance I've got for that.
And also, the team has been called a few things. First, they were called Chicago Cardinals. Then they were called the St. Louis Cardinals, not the baseball team. They were also nicknamed the Big Red to differentiate the two. Then when they moved to Arizona, they became known as the Phoenix Cardinals. And then they became known as the Arizona Cardinals. They didn't move. They just changed the name. It's like the Coyotes. They didn't change the name or they didn't change the logo or anything. They just went from Phoenix to Arizona, just the name.
Yeah, because they're trying to tap into that really healthy Flagstaff market. Hope that they're going to come down and catch a game because that's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, the Coyotes had a massive increase when they changed, a massive increase in attendance when they changed the name from Phoenix to Arizona. I'm pretty sure that let everyone back in. No, just no.
Is that a segue of who I think you're starting off with first? And it's probably not someone who was with the team in 1898, but I'm guessing someone who was with them at the 20s.
Oh, yeah. Like, of course. No, I can't. From what I understand, there are really no really super deserving Cardinals in the early 1900s and the 1910s. However, if you want to start things off with a bang, I think this is probably the best way you're going to do it. Duke Slater.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for anyone at home, who is Duke Slater? Well, I'll tell you who Duke Slater is. He is the best player not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Yeah, I said it. Duke Slater is the best player not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
He's got a loaded resume, too. Also a very historically significant player. He's a member of, was it the All-20s or All-30s decade team? I think All-20s, was it not?
Surprisingly, he was not on any of the All-Decade teams. However, he was a 7-time All-Pro, 5 of them being first time. Specifically, in 26 and 30, he was a consensus first-team All-Pro. He was the best lineman in the league by far, by anyone who had eyes, ears, and whoever was sentient at the time in 26 and 30 agreed that he was the best lineman in the NFL. Also, he was the very first African-American lineman in the NFL. The very, very first. The very first one.
But yeah, what a lot of people don't realize, though, is when the color barrier broke in a lot of sports, baseball included, that there were actually African-American players who were before that. And Slater was brought in Chicago and then somewhat grandfathered in as the teams decided they weren't going to have any more.
Yeah, well, it was around like the mid-30s where they kind of banned them, and then until the 1946, where I'll touch on that when we get to the Rams. But yeah, Duke Slater, he was great, and he was a finalist a couple times in 1970 and 1971. As a lineman, he was one of the best. What he did the best was when he blocked for when he played for the Rock Island Independents in the early 1920s. Yeah, that's a team that's no longer around anymore. When they rushed for 9 touchdowns against the Evansville Crimson Giants in 1922, and that record still stands to this day.
You know, I've got a lot of old jerseys. I don't think I have a Rock Island one.
Yeah. He also blocked for Ernie Evers when he set the NFL record with 6 rushing touchdowns in a game. That record also has not been broken to this day.
Why do you suppose he's not in?
I don't know. If I were to take a guess, it might have to do a little bit of the fact that he's just one of those outliers that fell out. It might also have to do with the fact that he was not part of the 1920s All-Decade team. He was a finalist in 70 and 71, but I don't know, it's just one of those very, very rare occurrences in which it just happened. I honestly can't even answer that. However, I would say that if Joe Horgan says that if you're the best player not in the Hall of Fame, I think everyone else should just follow, because as we know, Joe Horgan, who is one of the top historians in the NFL, who worked for the Hall of Fame for many years, said that if he had to vote for one guy, it would be Duke Slater. Offered Total Football, the official encyclopedia of the NFL, as one of the 300 greatest players in NFL history. Also, the Chicago Herald and Examiner mentioned how it was him who opened the holes for Never when a touchdown was in the making, and Nevers is in the Hall of Fame. Slater, who is credited with helping make Nevers into the Hall of Fame player he is not. Yes.
The other interesting thing that was sort of coming up, too, as I was sort of prepping for this particular one, I was taking a look at a lot of people's top 50 lists, 25, whatever they put together for this particular franchise. Half of them didn't even have Slater on it. So it's like if it happened in Chicago, it didn't exist.
No. The only excuse I can understand is if you included how he played for Rock Island Independence and the Milwaukee Badgers very early in his career. But considering the fact that he still was a multi-time All-Pro, including a unanimous All-Pro twice when he was with the Cardinals, I don't think there's any excuse why he should not be on any list for the best Cardinals ever.
Yeah, and it was sort of shocking that he wasn't on. I think I looked at around 6 of them. He wasn't on 4 of them.
That does not make any sense to me.
No, nor myself. But like we say that for a lot of people, history doesn't even begin until 1967. I guess sort of asking them to look before that would be even harder. Because there's all those great St. Louis Cardinals. Neil Lomax comes to mind.
Well, to be fair, Larry Wilson's one of the greatest players in NFL history.
Who's your number two for this team? Give me a few more that you've got for the Cardinals.
Pat Harter. He played in the 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
Six-time All-Pro, 3 first team, 3 second team, 2-time Pro Bowl. So just ignore the Pro Bowls in this case. 6-time All-Pro, a 3-time NFL champion. The last 2 when he played for the Detroit Lions, and he was very effective in those games as well. He was also the NFL's MVP in 1948.
Yeah, which is, it's a pretty big year. Sometimes when people are looking at the first half of the 40s, and correctly so, you can dismiss accomplishments from 42, 43, 44, 45 when the NFL was depleted, but that's certainly not the case in 48.
Mm-hmm. He also led the NFL in scoring 3 times as well, so yes. It's not like, again, I don't see the excuse for this guy either. Pat Harter and Duke Slater, these two former players, when the Cardinals were back all the way in Chicago, paved the way for the dream backfield, and in the case of Duke Slater, broke records that will most likely never be broken in NFL history ever again.
But this could be the year for Slater for sure, I think, with the announcements. Well, granted, it's not official yet, but it sure looks like for the 100th anniversary, they're going to be having a possible 20-person class to rectify a lot of wrongs.
It's most likely going to be the case. The only question I have about Slater is that it's not that he's not deserving. No, obviously Duke Slater is deserving. The real question is whether or not it's just going to be former all-decade team players, or it's just not going to matter. Because if it's not going to matter, then Duke Slater's obviously going to be on that list. But if it's just all-decade players, then Duke Slater's not going to be on there.
And I wonder if you're bringing that up because I've read something where a lot of the people who are sort of pushing for that are mentioning all-decade people who are not in. Is that sort of why you brought that line up?
Yes, because Duke Slater, despite his accomplishments, he is not on the all-decade team. However, Pat Harter is on the 1940s all-decade team. However, the only downside with that is there are quite a few on that list of the 1940s all-decade team that's not in yet. And, I will mention their names down the line when we get to them, but it's a bit tricky for Pat Harter. I'm going to say that. But I do think out of the two, Duke Slater is by far more likely.
I think so. I've read a few articles, too, sort of pushing for his induction. Also, too, as I'm sure you're aware, too, Slater also had considering he was an African-American in the 40s and 50s, to become a judge in the state of Illinois.
He also, he earned his law degree when he was a player.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? He did what?
He earned his law degree when he was still playing.
Oh, I didn't know that happened when he was still playing. Okay. So, we're talking about a very significant man, not just in football, but a trailblazer in every sense of the word. So, Slater, he checks every box.
The only thing that's holding him back is the fact he's not on that 1920s all-decade team. And when you are Duke Slater, who cares?
Well, it's also one of the best football names ever.
Just the name. Well, his real name is Frederick, but Duke Slater just sounds tough. It sounds mean. Well, he is not related to Jackie Slater or Matthew Slater, as Slater had no children of his own.
But he is a distant relative of A.C. Slater from Saved by the Bell.
I wish.
Yeah. All right. So bad joke aside, moving on from when they moved into St. Louis, Arizona, there's a couple. I don't want to touch on the current Cardinals. So, we're going to be taking that in a different step a little bit later. But I think you've got a couple more that you want to touch on. One I know that you were talking to me about earlier, whether we're discussing him as a Cardinal or a Giant, and I say he's a Cardinal.
Otis Anderson. Mm-hmm. I was asking that question because I live in a house where I grew up as a Giants fan, obviously, and I knew that Otis Anderson won the Super Bowl MVP when they prevailed over the Rams. Thanks a lot, Scott Norwood. And he won Super Bowl MVP. Otis Anderson, I think, was definitely easily a good player. The only question I have is he's a bit borderline for many people. Now, granted, he did win the Super Bowl MVP, and he did win Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he was a two-time All-Pro, so that definitely helps him. And he rushed for over 10,000 yards, so I think that definitely helps him out. And he also is top 20 all-time in rushing touchdowns, so that also helps him out along the way. But the only and he also won Comeback Player of the Year, and he was a two-time champion. So he really has gotten everything except all that's missing is just an MVP. However, the only question I have about Otis Anderson is, it's nothing against him. It's the fact that there's better running backs out there. Nothing against Otis Anderson. I think Otis Anderson was a quality running back in his time. However, the only downside is, he had a very strong beginning and a very strong end of his career, but the middle part, it's usually not as mentioned.
And kind of rightfully so. I mean, like he was in that second tier for a long period of time. Granted, playing for the Cardinals when he didn't really help. I know when I first started watching football, just to age myself here, this was back in the day here. Back in the day, Vinny, when like growing up in Canada, you're pretty much limited to that one game that they're going to show. And if it was against a Buffalo Bills game, they weren't showing anything other than Buffalo due to territorial rights. But there'd always be that second game, which would always seem to be Cowboys, Redskins, or Cowboys, Giants, or Redskins, Giants.
So, not the Lions?
Pardon me?
The Lions weren't there?
No, Giants. No, it was always, because I was closer to Buffalo. If I was closer to Windsor, that might be different. But it was always like a 4:00 NFC East game. And it was I was pretty much taught as a little kid that the ass end of that division, that's when they were in there, and geography made no sense for football. It was always the Cardinals. So why
the Arizona Cardinals, part of the NFC East.
Yeah, when I was a kid though, I still remember the St. Louis to Arizona move, but then they kept them in the NFC East, which made so much sense.
And then when they had the Carolina Panthers, part of the NFC West. Because that makes so much sense.
Well, I mean, it just goes back to the whole powerful, of if you're a strong team. I mean, Dallas shouldn't be in the division they're in now either. But when they realigned, I mean, Dallas pretty much got what they wanted, and I'm sure New York, Philly, and Washington wants Dallas coming in every week anyway, or every week, nice, once a year.
Well, at least for the Cowboys, it makes sense because they've always had a very strong rivalry with those teams. The Cardinals never had a rivalry with anyone. They were just last in their division every year.
Well, yeah, I mean, like they were even when they were just like striving to be mediocre. I mean, the Giants were so good, the Redskins were so good, Dallas was so good, and Philly wasn't terrible.
Even the Eagles.
Yeah, but I digress. So. Anderson, and I agree with you what you say. He's sort of like that borderline candidate. I think we're going to get to another guy. I consider my Mario Mendoza line of running backs a little bit later. Any other ones that stand out to you for the Cardinals before we move on?
One guy I do want to mention. He was actually a senior finalist 10 years ago. This was right after he died. Marshall Goldberg, who played with the Chicago Cardinals.
That's right. In the 1940s. Yes. And that's a very good one, too.
That one I thought you were almost going to miss out because Marshall Goldberg was a senior candidate the year after he died. He was a finalist along with Emmett Thomas for the class of 2008. Emmett Thomas made it. Marshall Goldberg did not. And now, granted, I don't have as much information on Goldberg as I do Slater or Harder. However, in all objectiveness, it must kind of suck for his family. Like, right after he dies, we're going to make it. No.
Yeah, well, I think in the case of many of these Halls of Fame, no, they don't want to be told who to put in.
Well, Marshall Goldberg, like Pat Harder, was also part of that very big dream backfield when he was a leader on the one league and the two conference champions for the Cardinals. He led the NFL in interceptions in 1941, and he also twice led the league in kickoff returns, and also finished third in the NFL with a 24.2 yard average in 41, as well as second at 26.2 in 1942. The only downside about him is the fact that he was only an All-Pro once, and he also missed 2 years in the military because of World War II. Mm-hmm. But to be fair, a lot of guys missed time during
absolutely.
Because of.
Yeah, and I don't think if you're an elite player in any sport in between 42 and 45, in hockey it would be 39 to 45 because Canada joined the war 2 years early. We sort of set everything up for you guys later. Just a little Canadian history lesson for you.
The Japanese forced this in there.
Well, that's for a history podcast another time, which, unless it's the history of like bad sitcoms, I'm not really sure I'm qualified to sort of give any opinion on that. But yeah, Goldberg is definitely one. I'm glad you brought him up because that's somebody that I've got earmarked for my expansion project that I talked to you about. For whatever reason, I just forgot about his time in my preparation for him as a Cardinal. Probably because his name never came up either on those other things that I was telling you about. Is there any more contemporary Cardinals that people are sort of aware of that you're thinking?
Well, the one that most people know about is Anquan Boldin, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good case. Not great case, but good.
The downside of him is, yes, he won Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he was a 3-time Pro Bowler, and he won Walter Payton Man of the Year, and he won a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. The only downside I have with Boldin is the fact that he never was an All-Pro, and he also played in an era in which, there was lots of gigantic stats for the wide receivers. It's
right.
I don't know.
And he had a teammate that's probably going to go in, and that doesn't bode well for him either. In Larry Fitzgerald.
Oh yeah, Larry Fitzgerald's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, I don't really have to say much about him, but for those who don't know, Larry Fitzgerald is one of the greatest players in NFL history. He's 11-time All-Pro, 3-time All-Pro, a 2-time receptions leader, 2-time receiving touchdowns leader, Man of the Year. Also won the Rooney Award. Second all-time in receiving yards. I think he's also second all-time. He's also third in receptions. He's 7th in receiving touchdowns. I mean, there is literally nothing negative that anyone could ever say about Larry Fitzgerald.
No, totally, I agree.
He might not have ever won a Super Bowl, but when he is in the playoffs, you always know you're getting a guy who has always been the epitome of clutch.
Well, I'm not going to hold him up. What was I tweeting a lot to during the NBA Finals? Jeremy Lin, or after it happened, Jeremy Lin 1, Carmelo Anthony 0.
Yeah, I was sharing a lot of those memes back when the finals was going on, and DeMarcus Cousins thought he'd get an easy ring. Jeremy Lin says. Did
Cousins just sign with the Lakers now? I think.
Yeah, he did.
Well, he can try it again. He might be sort of a newer version of the mailman Karl Malone chasing that ring. That's just never going to happen. But I always liked Boogie, but I think Boogie's definitely on the back nine of his career. The injuries are piling up. But I'm talking basketball. I shouldn't be. Football. There's one Cardinal, and I got one more that I want to take. Because this name keeps coming up, and I don't agree. I don't agree at all, and I think it always comes back up to where people are sort of like trying to put too much on character, and I think it should be really what happens on the field more than anything else. It's Pat Tillman. That name comes up all the time. But you think
Tillman's not making the Hall of Fame?
No, I agree. He shouldn't. He shouldn't even come close to it. And it's nothing against him as a person, and what he did was incredible. The sacrifice that he made, again, like, you can't say enough of that. But he's not a Pro Football Hall of Famer. He's not even close. And
The only reason that's why people even mention him is just because, he died in combat, which, yes, it really is sad and whatnot. However, he never was a Pro Bowler. He never was an All-Pro. He only had 2 sacks, only had 340 tackles. Good player. But if you think he's a Hall of Famer, I mean, come on, man.
Yeah. So, and that's, and again, we just want to be very, very clear. That the sporting Hall of Fames should have to do a lot more with accomplishments on field. Yes, I understand why people will say character matters. I'm not necessarily always a big proponent of that. If we are, then there's a lot of sweeping out of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Ty Cobb, I'm looking in your direction, that we'd sort of have to do. But
Ty Cobb is apparently hurting people on the field, apparently bad, but gambling a bit, even though it's legal, that's bad.
Oh, man. They wouldn't.
But my feelings on the Baseball Hall of Fame is for another time. But as for, Tillman, he's not making the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
There's a 0.000% chance that Tillman will ever make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. However, that is nothing against him as a person.
Right.
He is a hero. He served their country. I have a lot of respect for the military, but, he's not making the Hall of Fame, guys. If you want to talk about an actual Pat has a chance at the Hall of Fame, why not an active player like, Patrick Peterson?
A very good chance. Very, very good chance. Yep.
Patrick Peterson is a guy that I have a lot of respect for. An 8-time All-Pro. 8 years in the league. 8 All-Pros. No, 8 Pro Bowls, my bad. 8-time Pro Bowler, 8 years in the league.
Yeah, very, massively impressive.
Pro Bowler in just 8 years. And he's 28. He's going to be 29 in 2 days. As I'm recording. He's going to be 29 on July 12th, and July 11th. And this guy is already an 8-time Pro Bowler. I think he's deserving. Patrick Peterson is known as one of the best cornerbacks in the league. He's always known for being a great teammate. He's also known for being a great tackler. He was also recently made it to the All-Pro this year as a first-team member, part of Sporting News. But, Patrick Peterson might be a little bit of a shakier case, but I think once he reaches 10 Pro Bowls, which I think will happen, he'll get in like that.
I think so too. So I think at this point we're safe to move on to what I think is going to be the longest part of the discussion, the Los Angeles Rams.
Cleveland / Los Angeles first time / St. Louis / Los Angeles the second time.
I stand corrected. I apologize. I don't know what I was thinking by doing it that way. There's
when you're talking about historical teams that made a difference for the NFL, what comes to mind? You usually think of the Packers, the Bears, the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Raiders, and the Patriots. But what if I was to tell you that the Rams are actually kind of one of those teams, but no one mentions them?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong in that. The Rams moved around. I guess the amount of times that they've sort of done that really hasn't helped them. Los Angeles, as big as that is, has not always been the greatest football market, but there's a lot of influence and things that have happened in Rams history. And there's a lot of Rams that I know that you're going to be talking about that are Hall of Fame worthy. And we're not talking about the greatest show on turf. We've got people way before that.
Oh yeah, like I mentioned, the team obviously was in Los Angeles. Obviously, they should be in the LA. When you really think about it, because forget about the Dodgers, forget about the Giants. What was the first ever team to ever go to California?
That would be the Rams.
It was the Rams. Not before the Lakers, before the Dodgers. The Rams were the first ever professional sports team in California, Los Angeles. Period. They started. Everyone else followed. The Rams were the hipsters of their time. They also were the first teams to ever have logos on their helmets. When, I forgot his name, painted the Rams horns on them, on the leather helmets.
That's right. Yeah, I can picture that it's going to bother me, but I'll look that up later. But yeah, I do recall. I know exactly what you're talking about too. But the name's escaping me. But yeah, a lot of big deal, a lot of things with the Rams. The one guy I want you to talk about first, mainly because I think you've been talking on Twitter a lot with some of the people who are pushing for this particular person. I don't know that he's the most deserving Ram, but I think he's the one you might be most familiar with. Also, you've been talking to a lot of people who are pushing for that, and that's Roman Gabriel. So why does Gabriel? Why should he be a Hall of Famer?
Roman Gabriel, in my opinion, he is not the best Ram, not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I agree.
But the question is, why am I mentioning him? Well, it's because I think that the Twitter page, Roman Gabriel for the Hall of Fame, is the best run online push for a Hall of Famer out there. I think it is easily the best one. I love what Vinny Sheenan, the guy who's been doing the campaign, has done. He has brought many people in, young and old. He's brought Roman Gabriel back into the discussion of, deserving guys for the Hall of Fame. And it's because of Sheenan. And he has almost 1,700 followers for the Roman Gabriel page. He, some voters have mentioned him. Of course, I've mentioned it because, what he's done is what I wish, all other fans have done for their team. Because people always want to mention, the Rams have no fans. Look in LA, it's always empty. No, the Rams have fans. The Rams have fans. If they do not have enough fans, then this campaign would not be as successful than it already is.
Yeah. So, stat wise, do you see now? You said you don't think Gabriel, and I agree with you on this, is not the greatest Ram who's not in the Hall of Fame, but should he be in your opinion?
Before I mention him, I just want to mention Roman Gabriel. Why him? Well, Gabriel was also an MVP candidate in 1969. When he was with the Rams, he of course had 11 straight wins when he was their starting quarterback in '69, where he unfortunately fell in the first round because he might not have ever won a playoff game, but don't hold that against him. He also won Comeback Player of the Year, 2-time All-Pro. In '67, when Johnny Unitas won the MVP, even though he won, he was very neck and neck with Roman Gabriel for most of the season. And still, many people back then thought, Gabriel probably should have won that award. He won. He was the NFL passing touchdown leaders in '69 and '73 when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was also the very first Asian American quarterback to ever start in the NFL. So this is a bit of a barrier breaker. And he also was pretty durable. He had the record for most amount of consecutive starts by an NFL quarterback with 89.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, he was. Also, when he retired, he became the only quarterback from his era to still rank high in the lowest interception percentage category in NFL passing statistics.
And I think that's a big deal. Yep, for sure.
I mean, he was pretty accurate with the ball. And if you look at his build, I think of a Big Ben almost, like a big burly guy who was able to run. He's almost, except unlike Big Ben, early in his career he was pretty durable, but at the end of his career, his body started to break down a bit. That's why he went to the Philadelphia Eagles, where of course he had the one great season in '73, but kind of fell off a little bit afterwards. And now we're at this point in which Roman Gabriel is one of the most considered guys. And now, also, Talk of Fame Network, fans voted, and the most requested guy that they got was Roman Gabriel.
Really?
Yes, Roman Gabriel got the most amount of votes for Talk of Fame Sports. Obviously, the fans voted. But there was a lot of support for Roman Gabriel. It just came in massive. And this was against guys that I'm going to mention, Maxie Vaughn, Andy Russell, Duke Slater, who I mentioned, Joe Jacoby was also there. And Roman Gabriel, by the fan polling, did better than all of them.
Well, I mean, fan support, I mean, I guess it really matters as to, well, we'll see how much that matters. Sometimes fan support doesn't.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean, I have mixed feelings on fan support because, sometimes you can do some good things like this. Or you could be like a Raiders fan acting for Matt Millen and John Matuzak.
Well, I was just talking to another person. I have another show that's going to be coming up soon, and we were talking about briefly. It was about the Hockey Hall of Fame, and then we went into the rock and roll thing. In the fan vote that you can actually do in the kiosk in Cleveland, the physical kiosk. Right now, number 1 is Motley Crue, which is great.
That's nice.
Number 2 and number 4. I mean, they're people that make sense. Number 5 is Freddie Mercury as a solo artist, which makes no sense because Freddie Mercury had he didn't do it. He barely did anything as a solo artist. So it's like everyone who voted
because
there.
It's Freddie Mercury.
Well, probably
Freddie Mercury. That's why.
Probably. So like, oh, well, we know this person, and there's a movie that just came out. So sometimes it's shit like that, which is why maybe fan votes don't always matter for reasons just like that. But I digress.
But pause one second. Wait, Motley Crue's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
No, they're not. They've never even been nominated either.
How was that possible?
There's a lot of great... That's how my whole damn website started, man. Was from a bar conversation about great bands who were not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when I got into a drunken argument about why Madonna should be in, and she just got inducted.
Yay!
So that just sort of, that would have been 2008, 2009. So then I put together some lists, and
Looks like you won that discussion. You got a website, and you got Madonna in.
Well, no, I didn't get Madonna in. That was when she got in. I just argued that it was warranted. So I don't know how much Halls of Fame actually pay attention to anything I do, if at all. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. And if they do pay attention, they're not going to acknowledge it. I know that for sure.
Well, at least I'm going to acknowledge it. You know that for sure.
Absolutely. So, Gabriel, even though that's where I wanted to start with, you've got a couple more that you've got higher. I know that I do also. I just want to go on these really briefly because I think that what they've done speaks for themselves. And I know I'm sort of going backwards from what we did with the Cardinals. I just want to sort of like fast forward. There's 2 Rams from that Greatest Show on Turf who are not in. Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt. Holt never been a finalist. Bruce is inching his way closer and closer. I think Bruce is going to get in. Does Torrey Holt get screwed over?
Bruce is definitely going to make the Hall of Fame. And as for Torrey Holt, he's been a semifinalist like the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be I think he's going to be a finalist as soon as Bruce makes the Hall of Fame.
But will he have enough time to get in?
Yes, I think Torrey Holt, at the pace he's going, I don't think he's going to be a semifinalist much longer. I think he's going to be a finalist sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he's going to make the Hall of Fame until Isaac Bruce makes it.
Oh, I agree.
Because I know that it really, the debate, there's that debate, like, who is better, Isaac Bruce or Torrey Holt? Because Bruce has, like, the longevity where Holt had the strength in a shorter time.
Right.
However, Bruce is winning out, obviously, considering he's been a finalist the last couple of years. And there's also a bit of a bigger fan push for Isaac Bruce as well. Like, the Rams fans, besides Robin Gabriel, they're also pretty big on wanting Isaac Bruce in.
Mm-hmm. And they should be.
Yeah, they've done a really good job at it. Like, Isaac Bruce, like, it's a pretty simple reason. When he retired his second all-time in receiving yards, it means he retired second all-time in receiving yards. I mean,
absolutely.
Absolutely. He's 5 now, but, when you retire second all-time in receiving yards, I mean, it's going to mean at least something.
Yeah, and he's got the ring.
Yeah, and also he was a great player. I don't think anyone could dispute that. And as for Torrey Holt, unlike Bruce, he did make the All-Decade team, and he did have more Pro Bowls and a couple more All-Pros. However, the thing that held Holt back was the fact that he played for a bit of a short time. They both retired the same year, 2009. However, Bruce played five more seasons prior. That's why Bruce has the edge as opposed to Holt. Nothing against Holt, but I'm pretty sure even he knows that he's not going to make it until his buddy Bruce makes it. And I think everyone agrees about that.
Yeah, no, I totally am 100% in agreement with that. And if I'm sort of the Rams sort of fan base, I think you recognize that, you get Bruce in, and then you just sort of like pound the drum for Holt.
That's exactly what I've been seeing with Rams fans, and I completely agree where they're coming from, and I would do the exact same thing. Because it's like Holt is a little bit more complicated, whereas Bruce is pretty straightforward. Finish second all time receiving yards. Done. That's your case. It sounds pretty easy to me.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a few other ones that are certainly worth discussing for the Rams. I mean, we're not done with this team yet. Because we said it's going to be the longest one. I know that anyone sort of thinking about this division knows that it has to be. There's a couple that I've sort of got in mind. Maxi Bon, you just touched on him, but Eddie Medor to me.
Bon, I'm going to mention him with the Eagles more so because he had
all right. So then,
career there.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. So let's just move on from him. So Medor is another one that we discussed briefly. That I think a lot of people aren't that familiar with him.
No, Eddie Medor or Meter. I don't know how you're supposed to say it, but he truly was a great player for his time. He was the pres. In terms of how he was as a player, 6-time Pro Bowler, 2-time First Team All-Pro, 4-time Second Team All-Pro, and part of the 1960s All-Decade team. On that All-Decade team, he is the only safety on there that's not in the Hall of Fame. The other two, Larry Wilson, made it, and Willie Wood made it. Eddie Meter, still not in yet.
Do you think it's because of just that position being disrespected? Because if you want to go, we always talk about special teamers not being respected by the Hall of Fame, and I have that bias myself. But safeties, like defensive backs in general, safeties especially.
Yes. However, like I said before, because people are now warming up even more so with safeties, I think Meter, whatever the hell his name is, like I see the two interchangeably. Want to hear a bold prediction?
Sure.
I think him and Karras, or Novus are going to be one of the three guys they choose from the 60s All-Decade team for 2020.
I'd agree with that. I think Novus is definitely going to be one of those guys. Medor, I could see that as possible. Yeah, I mean, like I think that's a pretty good prediction. Usually, I like to make beer bets, but I agree with you. So no beer bet on this one. Besides, I already owe so much beer because I keep getting all this shit wrong.
Well, I don't think Medor's going to make it this year, though. However, he truly was a great player. Like Merlin Olsen said that Meter was one of the finest defensive backs he's ever seen. He was outstanding coverage and a fierce tackler. He had a remarkable nose for the football that allowed him to come up with the big plays again and again during his career with the Rams. And he really was a fine leader and one of his favorite teammates. That's what Merlin Olsen says.
And that's high praise.
I mean, it's Merlin Olsen we're talking about. Yes, we know they played together, but it's still Merlin Olsen. I mean, you're not going to ignore what Merlin Olsen is going to be telling you because it's Merlin Olsen, one of the greatest players in NFL history, one of the greatest defensive linemen in NFL history.
Well, it's also Father Murphy.
Arguably the greatest player to ever play for the Los Angeles / Cleveland / St. Louis, whatever, Rams.
That hasn't come out yet. But on my Rams list, that will be, I have him number 1.
I figured because, it's not like he has 14 Pro Bowls or anything. Oh, yeah, he does.
And it's also Father Murphy. I know you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. He had a TV show where he played Father Murphy.
I know he did have an acting career, though.
Yes, he did. As Father Murphy.
Indeed, he was. But he also... This I think could also help. This I think could also work for Meter.
Mm-hmm.
He was the NFL's Player Association president from '69 to 1970. Now, granted, that is a short time, and he also did win the Byron Whistler White Award in 1969 as well. So, again, not bad. It shows that he was always big with the players. He was willing to help them out, and he was one of them. He was considered a leader. The thing about Eddie Meter was that he was truly a leader on that legendary Rams defense.
Yeah, No, I agree. And but didn't have that cachet of being part of that fearsome foursome core.
Yeah, it didn't. Hey, don't feel too bad for him. He is known for his tackling, and if you're considered one of the greatest tacklers of your time, not bad.
No, that's true. Is there any other Rams you want to touch on? I think there might be one you might be thinking of, but is there anyone else?
There's actually a couple Rams. Now, remember when I was saying that the Rams broke barriers?
Mm-hmm.
And remember how I was mentioning about Duke Slater and how he was, a black player before, they kind of banned black players?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question for you. Who is the Jackie Robinson of football?
I don't know that answer.
Now, you might be saying, it might be Duke Slater. Well, it's a little bit of a more complicated question because they already had black players before.
Well, yeah, that's why I say I'm not even sure who that technically would be considered after they sort of made that moratorium.
Yeah, the guy I'm talking about is the first ever African American to sign a contract after World War II. That being Kenny Washington, actually.
Okay.
I know that's a bit of a weird choice because he only played 3 years and, he didn't have the best years. But, however, Kenny Washington is one of those guys, like I have someone that I speak to. With Kenny Washington, it's not about how he was the player. It's the impact. Keyword, impact. This is an impact player. Not on the field. The impact of what this became over time. And, Kenny Washington, the reason why they didn't really think about his name as much compared to, Jackie Robinson, because back then baseball was far more popular than football. And fortunately for him, there were other trailblazers that made the Hall of Fame, like, Marion Motley and, Bill Willis. But him and also, what was I going to say? But he, unlike them, he's not in the Hall of Fame. It's just that he's just that odd man out. He's one of those guys where I'm going to say, it's not really what he did on the field. It's more so the impact of what the signing meant to the NFL and just sports in general.
Yeah, and that does matter. I know we talked about how Willie O'Ree in hockey just got in for breaking a barrier, and he on the ice, he wasn't a spectacular player. Although anyone who could make an original 6 team is clearly pretty fucking good.
Yeah,
but in terms of overall ice accomplishments, I think he was only in the NHL for a year and a half, but. That stuff does matter. I got one name I want to throw at you before we go to the Niners. That is Henry Ellard. What's your thoughts on him?
Henry Ellard did finish top 5 in receiving yards. However, I personally feel like if we're going to talk about former Rams that were wide receivers that kind of need more attention, Harold Jackson, that's the guy I would really look at.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Now, Harold Jackson, you think of the wide receivers in the 1970s. You think of, Lynn Swann, you think of John Stallworth. You also think of, guys that should be in, Cliff Branch and Harold Carmichael and Drew Pearson. But who finished the 70s with the most amount of careers? Who had the most amount of receiving yards in the 1970s?
Harold Jackson had the most receiving yards of that whole decade?
Yes, Harold Jackson has the most amount of receiving yards for the entire decade, and in receptions and touchdowns.
I did not know that. I should know that, but I didn't.
Harold Jackson, and surprisingly, he's not part of the All-Decade team. But it's amazing. You would not think it's Harold Jackson. You would think, it might be Pearson. No, it's Harold Jackson. Harold Jackson is the one who had the most amount of yards, receptions, touchdowns, everything of the 1970s. Very, very underrated, very under the radar kind of a player. I don't hear many people really mention his name, and
No, myself included. Damn. All right, well, look at that. I got schooled again. All right.
Yeah, Harold Jackson. That's the name to keep in mind. Now, we're mentioning former Rams, but the Rams also have the most amount of active players that could potentially make the Hall of Fame as well.
I just want to a couple names really quick, and then just for the thing of time, we'll move on. But yeah, Aaron Donald. I think there was a Twitter feed that you were part of where someone was asking who's like the best chance of a young player to make the Hall of Fame, and then people put out a bunch of players that weren't really young. But for me, and I didn't participate in that, but Aaron Donald is for me 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D right now at this stage.
He's number one by far. Aaron Donald's the best young player. By young player, I mean a guy that entered the league in 2013 or 2014. That's why I consider like a young player. Like if you're in that, like around there, Aaron Donald is. I don't have much more to say. Like two-time Defensive Player of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the Super Bowl with the Rams. What's crazy about that is he was their second first-round pick, the Rams. Their first-round pick was Greg Robinson at number 2, who they got from the trade with the Redskins. And Greg Robinson's been a bust. I mean, he's been bouncing back and forth. He's an okay lineman, but they were very, very, very lucky to have their hands on Aaron Donald. I mean, what more do I say about Aaron Donald? He is the best defensive player in the NFL. I don't think there's a question in my mind about that.
No, for sure. So let's move up north to San Francisco. Personally, and I try to keep a lot of my personal opinions when I set up lists and then they change based on votes and etc. I'm a huge, huge supporter personally of one former San Francisco 49er who really, to me, opened up a lot of what running backs could do, and that's Roger Craig. And for me, I think it's very criminal that he's not been inducted yet.
Was there any doubt that Roger Craig would not be the number one 49er that's not in the Hall of Fame? I don't think so. He is easily, by far, the best San Francisco 49er that is not currently enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I don't think it comes even close. Like, you're looking at a guy who was a semifinalist 9 times and was a finalist 1 time. Keep in mind, 10 years in a row, he made it to the semifinals. And only one of those years, he made it to the finals, and he didn't get past top 15.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, semifinals, nope. And his final year, I said, hopefully he makes it in. No. Everson Walls did it. Joe Jacoby preached it, but Roger Craig, again, has to be stuck in semifinals purgatory with his friend Carl Mecklenburg.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I have Craig way higher than the albino rhino. I just like saying albino rhino.
Me too. Oh yeah, he's much higher than Carl Mecklenburg as well. But I mean, I'm referring to guys that have been, just semifinalists and just been stuck there year after year after year after year and year after year. And Roger Craig was the epitome of that. I mean, honestly, when you're at that level, come on. I mean, when you think of the 3 big offensive skill positions, you obviously think of a quarterback, a wide receiver, and a running back.
Yep.
You have your quarterback in, Joe Montana. You have your wide receiver in, Jerry Rice. You're missing that third guy. Roger Craig is that third guy. I don't think there's much to say about him. 3-time champion offensive player of the year, 4-time Pro Bowl, 2-time All-Pro, NFC player of the year in '88, part of the 1980s All-Decade team, the only running back that's on that All-Decade team that's not in. Walter Payton is in, Eric Dickerson is in, John Riggins is in, Roger Craig is not.
Yeah, first player to get 1,000 yards rushing and receiving.
Like Roger Craig, unlike Payton and Dickerson and Riggins, they made it in very early in terms of voting, whereas Craig, he's down the senior pool.
Yeah, I know. Which makes me feel super old because I certainly watched a lot of his games. But, okay, so obviously we're both in agreement that Roger Craig is a massive snub. Hopefully that gets in. But to me, Roger Craig should be in more than any other 49er, all the other ones combined, until maybe Patrick Willis becomes eligible.
Oh, I haven't mentioned him, but like Roger Craig, no, he's going to be eligible in 2020. It's going to be his first year coming up, as well as Justin Smith. But he's like,
you mean Willis?
No question in my mind that Roger Craig is easily the best San Francisco 49er that is not currently in the Hall of Fame. I don't think there's a question. Like, I can't say anything else. Like, just Roger Craig needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason at this point. I mean, come on. Roger Craig should be in.
Some of the names that keep coming up though from the Niners, and I don't agree with them. I mean, like, they were good, like, especially one that always comes up, and I get why, because of the catch. So I'm going with Dwight Clark.
No, I don't think Dwight Clark's going to be
I don't either. I don't either. So I don't think he's even going to be considered, and frankly, nor should he be. He should always be celebrated in San Francisco. He should never have to buy a beer again. He probably doesn't. I think he's sick.
He can't. He died last year.
That would help him not having to buy a beer. I forgot about that.
Yeah, he died of
ALS, right?
Died of, like, Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah, ALS. Okay, all right. I thought he had it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that he already passed away.
Yeah.
Hopefully he never. All right. Well, I'm feeling a little silly there on that one, but Clark probably never should. John Taylor comes up a bit. Thoughts on him?
John Taylor?
Yeah.
I do have him on the list. It just comes down to the fact that, John Taylor is a little bit lower on my list. I would say that he is not the best current modern era 49er that's not in the Hall of Fame. I think considering the fact that he was a return specialist, it kind of hurts him a little bit. I'm not going to hurt him that much because, like I said, I'm much more forgiving when it comes to special teamers. I mean, if we had enough time, I would mention how much I would want Johnny Hekker for the Hall of Fame for the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
But just like in this case, there's kind of more deserving Niners. Not saying I'm against him, but I'm just saying, let's wait till glaring omission makes it first, as well as, other glaring omission from the Niners, which I should mention his name right now. Bryant Young.
Yep. Yeah, that's somebody I thought might come up in this conversation.
Yeah, Bryant Young. Bit of under the radar. When you think of, like, defensive tackles in the 1990s, you think of, Cortez Kennedy, in. John Randall, in. Warren Sapp, in. Bryant Young, not even a semifinalist yet.
Why do you think that is?
Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm right here. Yeah, why do you think that is?
I think it's mainly because from what I get from 49ers fans, a lot of people assume that because he was more quiet compared to Randall, or maybe Kennedy or Sapp, and also because Brian Young, defensive tackle, is not exactly the sexiest position on the football field, but granted, John Randall and Cortez Kennedy and Warren Sapp proved, no, we look pretty sexy doing this. But the also thing that also hurts him is, like, Dana Stubblefield, who also won Defensive Player of the Year and is also won Defensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. He's probably not going to make the Hall of Fame because after his time with the Niners, he just fell off a cliff. Mm-hmm. But if you can ask 49ers fans who was a better player, they're always going to say Bryant Young. I mean, Bryant Young was a 4-time Pro Bowler, a first-team All-Pro, and a 3-time second-team All-Pro, 2-time first-team All-NFC. He was part of the Super Bowl 29 champion where the 49ers just absolutely killed the San Diego Chargers. No longer San Diego. He also won the Comeback Player of the Year in 1999. I mean, he also is the Niners' all-time sacks leader, way above Charles Haley. Charles Haley finished 60 something with the Niners.
Stubblefield's what, around 90 something?
What?
Stubblefield's at like 90 something, I think.
Stubblefield's much lower down. Like Stubblefield, when it comes to Stubblefield, obviously I think Bryant Young's a much more deserving player. But when it comes to Stubblefield, I mean, usually when you're a defensive rookie of the year and defensive player of the year, that means you're in the Hall of Fame. But if I recall, Stubblefield is one of one of the one or two exceptions to that rule. But and also, I don't not to be rude, but he had some off the field trouble since the NFL, like with some prison sentences and whatnot. But honestly, I don't think it's really going to matter that much. I think what's really going to matter is whether or not Bryant Young's going to make it, honestly, before he does.
I think there's a better chance that neither of them ever get in.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely chance. But again, when it comes down to it, I think until Roger Craig makes it,
I agree.
It's going to be a little bit before Bryant Young. I think Bryant Young after Craig, but there is another former Niner that played for a while that some people mentioned.
Can I guess?
Who do you think it is?
John Brody.
Yep. John Brody. When he retired, now granted, he made the playoffs 3 times in his career, but he also was a 2-time Pro Bowler and a 2-time All-Pro. That may not sound that enticing. Okay, many that was asking, well, I'm going to bolster this up for you. NFL Most Valuable Player in 1970. NFC Player of the Year in 1970. Comeback Player of the Year in 65. 2-time passing touchdowns leader. 3-time passing yards leader. Led the league in passer rating once, as well as the completion percentage leader twice.
Mm-hmm.
He also had his number retired by the 49ers.
And how many Hall of Fame wide receivers did John Brody have? I don't think any.
Yeah, that's the answer. I don't think none. Almost like Ken Anderson. Like Ken Anderson, he had no one really to throw it other than maybe Chris Collinsworth.
Ugh.
And Anderson's easily the best quarterback not in the Hall of Fame. And then afterwards, it gets a bit of a mishmash with Connerly, and before I mentioned Gabriel, and also you mentioned Brody. Gabriel, I think, has kind of more going for him. The fact that he was a MVP candidate twice, and the fact that he was very, very efficient. He was very durable. But Brody has a bit of a leg as well. When he retired, he finished as the 3rd most prolific career passer in NFL history. And he was on Pro Football Research Association 2nd ever Hall of Very Good class of 2004. That's his 2nd ever class. I think, if I recall, he was the first ever quarterback to be on this list. Before Anderson, before Gabriel, before Connerly. He was the very first one that they added.
You mentioned Collinsworth. Actually, I love him as a commentator. No. Having said that,
yeah, I like him. No.
YouTube this.
Collinsworth's not making the Hall of Fame.
No, I know he's not. But no, I'm just saying YouTube Chris Collinsworth and then type I like young girls.
To be fair, his voice kind of sounds like he might be your sex education teacher, but I have the utmost respect for Chris Collinsworth.
No, so do I, but you're going to change your opinion when you see this. It's some like AM show or PM, like some kind of news magazine show of the day, and it shows Collinsworth because he's a young player, and they're asking him about his dating, and he goes, "Well, I kind of like young girls. They don't know a whole lot." And then it shows him dancing in a club, and it's the creepiest fucking thing ever. And it only because most people like I remember watching him play, but I mean, like he wasn't an elite player, but you know him more as a commentator. And just after sort of like that thing, you can't look at him the same way ever again. Even though he said it when he was like 22, 23, just that whole thing. It's like, just do me a favor, YouTube that, and tell me what you think. If you can't find it, I'll find it for you and send it off to you. But I encourage anyone listening to this to do this.
Similarly, I never thought of Bill Cosby the same way after the allegations. Or when I think of when he says pudding, I always get a giggle, but for all the wrong reasons.
All I know is nobody must have loved this more than Lisa Bonet.
Oh God.
Well, hey,
man.
After all the things he did to her, forced her off the show for all her lack of morality. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, there are a couple Niners that are going to be coming up. Actually, for the first year of eligibility coming up this year, Patrick Willis and Justin Smith. I kind of want to put those two together because
I do too.
Retired the reason why I put them together is because Willis was obviously the better player, easily. He had a shorter career, but he was a 7-time Pro Bowler. He was, I think, if I recall, he was also a 6-time All-Pro.
Mm-hmm.
But Justin Smith is another guy as well that was always a very, very dominant dominant rusher for them as well. I do think Smith is a bit of a dark horse in it. I don't think he's going to make it until Willis makes it. And I do think Willis will make it. But it's going to be a little while as Justin Smith. I still think that, for a while, I think Justin Smith will get a bit of legs by the Niners fans, but it might take a little while.
Yeah, and there's a bit. Well, if Patrick Willis, I know he had that short career, but if Tony Baselli gets in, then a lot of things sort of change in my mind because it's a similar career in terms of accolades, obviously not in terms of position. But with the Niners, I think we can move up to probably the shortest conversation, Seattle.
Yeah, the Seahawks are actually, before I mention that, considering that we all know about the discussion involving Tom Flores and whatnot, there's another coach that has won 2 Super Bowls as well, that's won a couple Super Bowls as well as a head coach. And it was Bill Walsh's second in command for the 80s as well. That's George Seifert.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with Seifert is you could say, he inherited a good team already, but when you think of those Niners team, that defense, it was because of him. Once Walsh retired, he came in and they won a Super Bowl. Seifert, if Seifert was really that much of a detriment, wouldn't they regret not win the Super Bowl? You would think. I mean, granted, he had great players and all, but who coached those great players? It was Bill Walsh and George Seifert.
He kept everything together. Seifert. I don't think Seifert's ever been a semifinalist, has he?
No. I mean, obviously, Tom Flores is going to get far more push because, Seifert and Flores are kind of similar considering the fact they had a second stint as a head coach with, Seifert with the Panthers and Flores with the Seahawks. So they both did not do well. But everyone's gonna just forget that and just focus on how they were for the first time as head coach. With Flores, the thing that holds him up is the fact that he's the very first wild card team to win a Super Bowl. Did it with a backup quarterback, Hispanic. Seifert, middle-aged white guy. It's not really gonna get people up in arms or anything.
No, and it's always bigger when you do it the first time. It's like even though Steve Young might, depending on who you ask, Joe Montana will always be loved more than Steve Young.
Well, it's not like Steve Young will not be loved there.
Sure, no, I agree, and it's not like George Seifert's not well respected in San Francisco, but somebody did it first.
Oh yeah, whereas with Flores, he had John Madden, but once John Madden left, you had Tom Flores, and as you all know, there's no person that's been demanded more by the fans than Tom Flores. And as we talked before, I know it's a bit of a pinch, but it's really going to high here with, especially considering that that there's coaches opened. Don Coryell will be a lock in 2020. And considering that there's this one other coach's spot open, it could be Flores, so maybe they can finally stop begging for him. But, maybe George Seifert could be that guy that sneaks in. I highly doubt it, but
it could be. It's possible. Unless Jimmy Johnson takes that spot.
For instance, many people thought that, Jerry Kramer would get in first, but Dave Robinson made it in 2013, so I guess anything's possible. Mm-hmm. Nothing against Dave Robinson at all. But many more people were expecting, demanding of Jerry Kramer. Again, nothing against Dave Robinson. Nothing against Dave Robinson.
Well, the theory sort of going on, a lot of that with Kramer was, like a lot of the writers, when it was sort of more writer-driven, Kramer was one of the first athletes to be a bestseller.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Piss off some writers. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But I mean, if somebody it's got to be a shot to your ego in some capacity.
Oh yeah, but luckily, Kramer's in, everyone's in, and let's see what happens. But now we're moving to the black sheep of the NFC West.
In terms of this, in terms of profile, there's a lot. I think Seattle's developed quite the hell of a fan base. But in terms of this conversation, I don't think there's one Seattle Seahawk that is eligible. I just want to put that caveat in, that is eligible for the Hall of Fame, that I feel strong to champion right now.
There's some. It's a little trickier for the Seattle Seahawks. For those who don't know what I mean by the black sheep, unlike their three NFC West brethren, they were not founded way before the merger. In fact, they were founded in 1976 along with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were originally an AFC team until they increased it to 32, and they moved the Seattle Seahawks from the AFC West to the NFC West. And since that move, they have been one of the most dominant teams in the NFL, going to 3 Super Bowls, winning one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Also, too, they're not the newest or not the oldest sort of entry to this division either. The only ones in terms of, and do you consider Steve Hutchinson a Seahawk or a Viking?
Viking, it's a bit of a 50-50. I might go with Hutchinson a little bit more as a Seahawk because kind of started there first.
Right. So then that's the only one that I would champion. If we're calling him a Seahawk.
In his first two years, he made a top 10 as a finalist. Not bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So Hutchinson's on the path for that. The only other past Seahawk that ever comes up, at least that I see a lot, and I don't see him that way, is Dave Craig.
Dave Craig? What?
Well,
that's a joke, right?
No, it's not a joke. I've the first Twitter argument I ever got was someone who hated where I had him ranked.
Dave Craig's not going to be in the Hall of Fame.
I agree. In terms of longevity and what he accomplished, it's pretty damn impressive. In terms of the Hall of Fame, he doesn't belong.
No, if you want to talk about a Seahawk in terms of longevity with a team that, like Hutchinson, is in the modern era, Sean Alexander.
See, for me, that's my Mendoza.
What?
My Mario Mendoza line. You've heard the Mendoza line, right?
I've heard of the name.
Okay, so the Mendoza line, Chris Berman of ESPN years ago came up with that. And it was in reference to baseball, how if you're batting under the Mendoza line, that means you're batting under 200, because it was named after a guy named Mario Mendoza, a very light-hitting shortstop. So I'm just appropriating that term for this. Like Alexander, an MVP, he had a couple great years, but he didn't have a Hall of Fame career to me because he wasn't great for long enough.
Comes down to the fact that I think he started every single game for the first several years of his career. He had the Madden curse, one could say, and then.
Yeah.
However, the good thing about Alexander is that when he retired, in fact, currently he's 8th all time in rushing touchdowns. Every single other player in the top in the top 14, except for him and Adrian Peterson, are in the Hall of Fame.
Alexander's also never been a semifinalist, so he's not even on their radar at all.
Maybe not yet, at least.
Who do you put him? Okay, do you put him over someone who just retired? Whether he stays retired, I don't know. Marshawn Lynch. I have Lynch over Alexander.
Yeah, I have Lynch over Alexander as well.
Okay. Because stat-wise, I mean, Alexander comes out ahead, but to me, Lynch was the more important player.
Marshawn Lynch was always the more important player. I mean, there was no running back that anyone could argue. For that 3-year stretch, 2012, 2014, everyone agreed that Marshawn Lynch, best running back in the NFL. No question about it.
So, are we missing any Seahawks here? Because there's going to be some Richard Sherman will come up down the road.
And we mentioned Earl Thomas in the last one, obviously.
Yeah.
One as well.
Yeah.
We can actually mention 2 active Seahawks. Well, active Seahawks as in like they're playing for the team right now. Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas, they're not Seahawks anymore, but yet 2 major factions of the Legion of Boom defense. They're on a track to Canton. But there's another guy that's the longest lasting member of the Legion of Boom defense and is still with the team, Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, Wagner's someone we're talking about. Also Russell Wilson, of course. Mr. Ciara.
Oh, yeah, Russell Wilson definitely is another one I was thinking. I would say that Wilson and Wagner, 2 guys from the 2012 class, both Day 2 picks, Grand Slam. You got your best quarterback in franchise history and a face, just an absolute force on that defense. Everyone, there's no question in my mind that Bobby Wagner is on the track to make the Hall of Fame. And as for Russell Wilson, it's a bit trickier. I think Russell Wilson definitely has it in him. I think Russell Wilson at this stage, considering the fact that his touchdown interception ratio, 196 to only 63, a passer rating of 100.3, a 64.2 completion percentage, an MVP candidate multiple years. I mean, yeah, and also the most amount of he has the highest contract in the NFL. Yeah, I think he's on his way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And he doesn't have the same. He's still putting up good numbers, and he doesn't have what he used to have. And Russell Wilson makes that team so much better. I'm so pumped for the upcoming season, except for now that I live in the Atlantic time zone. Damn it, everything's now an hour later.
You get used to it here.
Well, it's only going to be really bad once daylight savings hits, because there's none of that here.
There are actually a few more Seahawks I do want to mention, though. But this, of course, mentions the Seahawks in terms of, now. When you think of, the Seahawks' success now. Pete Carroll, their head coach, I think he's going to be on the all-decade team for the head coach, because really Belichick has by far been the best head coach of this decade yet again. But if you were to choose the second best one, I guess you would say maybe Andy Reid or Pete Carroll. And I think it's going to be either one of those two.
Carroll didn't give it to Lynch in that final play of the game. Carroll now drops down a couple spots just for that. Totally serious.
I think so too, but I don't know. I would say that the Carroll has definitely been a big reason as to why the Seahawks have been kind of like the Patriots. And it's I say the Patriots of the NFC. Obviously, they're not as good as the Patriots, but in terms of a team that's always competitive year in, year out, always have a winning record. And, Pete Carroll is a big reason as to why that's the case.
Yeah, but there's some work to do. Coaches haven't gotten a lot of their due. How old is Pete Carroll now? How many more years do you think he's got?
That's a good question, because he's more energetic than Bill Belichick, yet he is older than Bill Belichick.
Right now, Dwight Clark is more energetic than Bill Belichick.
Yeah, and I think my tree outside shows more emotion on press conferences than Bill Belichick. And that's nothing against Bill Belichick. I love his press conferences.
Because Pete Carroll sort of looked the same ever since I remember watching him coach at USC. So I don't even know how old he is. So
he's like his late 60s. But the guy that put this team together, though, was John Schneider. One of the best executives in the NFL. Started his career out as a scout for the Packers. Then he went to the Chiefs as an executive. Bounced around a little bit when he went back to the Packers as an executive. doing well there. The Packers have been a well-run organization, not as much recently, but definitely in the 2000s. And then he became the GM and the head president of the Seattle Seahawks. And since 2010, came in like a package deal with Pete Carroll. I mean, it's been incredible. He really has been. Made the playoffs in 2010, winning their division with a losing record somehow. 2012, made the playoffs. 2013, won their division, won the Super Bowl. 2014, won their division, went to the Super Bowl. 2015, went to the playoffs. 2016, won their division, went to the playoffs. 2017, winning record, but did not make the playoffs. 2018, went to the playoffs. Not bad. Pretty good for the guy that helped draft the Legion of Boom.
Yeah, no, and that's someone who doesn't get a lot of press, but maybe that could happen down the road. Are we missing any other Seahawks, or are we looking to wrap this up and think about our next division?
One more. There's one more Seahawk.
Who might that be?
And he just died recently. This might be an interesting one, but I think because of what he did with the team and that short amount of window, he really turned the Seahawks from just another team to one of the premier franchises in the NFL. That being Paul Allen.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Paul Allen, he died recently. As you know, Paul Allen was one of the co-founders of Microsoft along with Bill Gates, and he was responsible for keeping the Seahawks in the Pacific Northwest. They moved. He was responsible for moving the team from the AFC to the NFC, where they had CenturyLink Field, one of the loudest stadium in the NFL. He's responsible for that. He's responsible for the Seahawks, becoming the team that they are. I mean, he's responsible for hiring Mike Holmgren, who I will mention when I mention the Packers. He's responsible for this great run the Seahawks have had since the turn of the century. It all comes back to there's no person that I credit more with making the Seahawks who they are today. And I think of Paul Allen. I think of him as that guy. However, I think there are a few more owners more deserving than him, and also he just recently died. But like I said, not before Rosenblum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I know when you're huge on. All right, so as always let you decide who's going to be next. Are we going to do the same sort of circle? Are we looking at the NFC South next?
Yeah, NFC South. That's the next one. We're looking a bit of an easier
exactly.
With younger franchises, much younger franchises, and also not as successful franchises. So it's going to be a bit easier for us. However, there are quite a few players from this division looking up, and it might actually kind of hit home for both of us because you grew up as a Saints fan. I grew up as a Giants fan. I began to kind of like the Falcons as I got older.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of is going to be a bit of a more personal one for both of us.
Definitely. Well, Vinny, as always, it's been wonderful. I'll be sending you off that link to Chris Collinsworth that will change your life, or change how you view him anyway. I have to. And B, what we talked about last time, I'll be looking for your input on the top 50 or 100 active player rankings. Probably just 50.
Ooh. Also, don't forget about that non-player thing.
That's right. Yeah, so just for because we talked about that offline, but yeah, it'd be Vinny's going to put together I don't know how many you're going to put together, but people who the non-players in football who were worth Canton consideration.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very quality list that, it's going to be, I'm thinking at least around, I might start with 10, 20, but I know it's definitely going to grow from there. So it's going to be very, very exciting.
They always seem to grow. That I certainly learned that doing this. That's for damn sure.
Oh yeah, because as we know, as much people say we want it to be special, they're all lying to themselves. The real reasons why they say that was because they want their guy in sooner. But I think if you want to get your guy in sooner, the smart thing to do is to ask for more guys in every year, not the same. And it looks like that might happen sooner rather than later, because now that it's going to be 20 for 2020, there's actually a really bit of a thinking in some people's head that, hey, maybe they might have 10 every year down the road from afterwards, which I'm excited for.
And
I'm really excited for that.
It makes so much more sense in this sport than any other. You've got a 53-man roster. You're going to have more elite players.
Also, not to mention, if we know anything about, discussions like, Hall of Fames and whatnot, it can get a little heated between people. So I think having, a larger class and whatnot, this kind of eases some of that tension away. Yes, there'll be some of those people that say, oh, you're worshiping it, but people still want, like I mentioned, John Matuzak for the Hall of Fame.
John Matuzak.
So it could be worse. I saw one guy mention that he wanted Sid Taylor for the Hall of Fame.
God. Yeah. Will wonders never cease. All right, Vinny, we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Okay, I can't wait for that. Thanks so much, Kirk.
All right, take care.